Hi, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Esoterics Today with Amber and Satara. We are your co-hosts in this series in which we not only do we talk practically about esoteric and spiritual arts and spirit science and all things ancient and modern relative to spiritual practice, we are pretty dedicated here at Esoterics Today to bringing guests along with us in the conversation. And I'm sorry if there's a little bit of feedback, we'll just live with it. There's a lot of energy on this line right now, so we'll just get through it. So we're pretty dedicated to bringing guests that we feel that you all would really enjoy to hear from, both on our podcast and on our video. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce I should introduce myself. I am Amber Chamberlain, the Suburban Lightworker, and it's a pleasure to be here doing this work today with this gang. And I'm introducing my gorgeous co-host, Satara Jules Lightbringer, and our fantastic guest, Lisa Adams. Let me, before I turn it over to you, introduce Lisa. Lisa, thank you for being with us on Esoterics Today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited.
Excited to have you. Let me tell you guys a little bit of something about Lisa. She certainly is what I would call a modern and accomplished modern priestess. I always like to throw that word in there because a modern priestess is working from the ancient motif, and you'll find out about this as Lisa talks about this today. She truly is a lily and a luminary and astrologer as well. She provides intuitive work and energy healing work with her clients all across the world. She's an international provider, just like we are. And I think something really important that Lisa pointed out to us today is within her own dedication to her own self-care and well-being, she is absolutely dedicated to that. Of all of her clients and those she serves. So with that said, let me welcome Lisa and then turn it over to my beloved co-host, Satara, to just really jump us off in this conversation. Satara, what do you know?
Oh, everything I know can go on the back of a postage stamp. I know nothing about anything ever. You know what I'm like, random as. So yeah, it's lovely to have you here, Lisa. Very interesting to hear about your path and how you came to be who you are today within it. Because I know for pretty much anybody who's listening that's working in the spiritual field, our paths are laid out in front of us. So it just happens to be how resistant we are to walking them or not, depending on the hour of the day that we decide to tread upon them. So yeah, very much so. So I'm aware that, we've all started off, and where we've started off and where we are now can be absolutely fields apart. So it'll be lovely to hear how you got to be the beautiful you are today. So tell us about that, Lisa.
Thank you. So I grew up in your typical dysfunctional suburban family, a child of divorce, and my parents weren't cultured, but they weren't religious or spiritual, and there was a lot of codependency in the family, especially with the adult dynamics. And my parents were pretty young, so I felt in a lot of ways like I kind of grew up with them. They were partying and I guess muttering through life. It was not always easy. I never had this great relationship with my mom, and my dad and I, we got along great, but he was actually, drug and alcohol dependent, a good portion of his life, and, but a very loving man, and I could connect to and talk with him. But once my parents split up and my mom remarried, she married a really a dear man, but another, alcoholic. So there was always this kind of codependency. And they, I guess, had a lot of issues in the relationship, and there were issues in the family. When I got to a certain point in time as a teen, I was acting out a lot. and I was skipping school, and I was partying, and I was chasing after boys, and I was engaged in a lot of at-risk behaviors. Very rebellious, a lot of, inner anger and turmoil, and I mean, that's like a hard age to be anyway. But I think also, like, my parents weren't very present with me, and my mom and stepdad especially, if I acted out, they didn't try to understand the behavior. They were just all about like punishment and control and punishment. And so I kept pushing, and they would keep trying to control and punish, to the point where eventually they just kicked me out of the house. And so I've been on my own since I was 16. I lived with my dad briefly, but I really have had to parent myself, and learn a lot from from that time. And them kicking me out at this young age was actually a real, obviously pivotal moment, because that's when I started asking all the existential questions, and kind of, asking hard questions and trying to figure out what happened, and, why don't my parents love me, and why did I get kicked out, and, and am I a bad person, and just trying to suss through all of those kinds of things and get some meaning and understanding. I didn't for a long time, but I started, like reading books on like witchcraft and spirituality and meditation. And then I started going to a satsang, which is a form of bhakti yoga, a ceremonial form of bhakti yoga. Satya Sai Baba was the avatar that we honored and venerated in satsang. So I got to start meeting all these people in the New Age and spiritual communities, and start meditating and singing chants and being more exposed to like energy work and that kind of thing. But along the way, I was still partying. I was still totally, like engaged in this at-risk behavior. And I've seen friends die along the way too, at a young age, in high school and everything. One of my big wake-up calls was right after I turned 21. I got arrested for drinking and driving. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it scared the shit out of me. So, and I had a bag of marijuana. And so, I had all these charges. I was driving on a suspended license. It was my best friend's car. The car got impounded. I spent a night in jail. I had to go to court, like all that stuff. And that was the best thing, because it's when I started understanding that I'm responsible for my choices, and I'm responsible for what happens in my life. And, I had to be scared shitless in order to figure that out. But that started me in understanding, and seeking, like, what's my purpose? I know I have a purpose. I have this drive and this purpose, but I didn't know what it was. And so I started asking those questions too. And eventually I came to understand that I'm here to help other people. Here to help them grow and heal and evolve. And that I'm not here to be a party girl. So yeah, it was a scary time for me. I was having panic attacks and everything, but I was praying and surrendering through that process too.
That's interesting, isn't it? That somewhere in everybody's life there is that defining moment that you suddenly do the, oh yes, this is how it works.
Yeah, I needed that so hardcore. I really, really did. During that period of time, I had like moved away from all my friends and family. And so I really thought of it, and still do look back and see that as something of a vision quest. So like some sort of trial period I just had to seek out and go to and get out of my kind of comfort zone in order to start learning and understanding and opening up in new ways.
Yeah, totally. And that's perfect, really, because of course the now us recognizes that we manifest what we need to manifest to kick our own backsides into perhaps more of the right direction than we've before, because I don't know about Amber, but I think we've all been party girls at some point. Yeah.
Oh, actually, it's interesting because in my case, there was so much pressure on me because of my family being so dysfunctional, as Lisa was indicating. My mother, who's still living, is chronically mentally ill. And there was so much pressure to maintain. I had the emotional burden of my family on my shoulders. So I really, while I didn't do the big partying thing, I was over there sort of draining my energetics into my, I was the heart, the emotion, I was processing it all of the pain. So for me, in order to control that for myself, I was an excellent student. I was a straight arrow, really, for the most part. I didn't have that other end of that piece, which meant that my openings and my change ups had to come in view of that pain and that suffering, because it was really, really deep. And it was pretty. I was a highly sensitive, highly aware person and child, and all I can say is thank God for growing up on a farm and having nature at my fingertips. I think nature held me in her arms, so I could hold the energy of my family. So it's a different. But I want to go back to just sort of from our show perspective, some things that you said, Lisa. One of the things I noticed, and Satara, you certainly fit this. I think Lisa's at the tail end of what we would. You have less familiarity, I think, with this one, but the theme, the Dolores Cannon body of work and other bodies of work that talk about the first wave of souls who were arriving to the planet to kind of, this is like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. These would be people who came in at that juncture, souls that came in, and how that wave of us, our awakenings were intense like that. Our awareness is the getting kicked up the rear, as you mentioned, Satara.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm watching as, and I certainly see it in my own child, I'm watching as what we would refer to, and our listeners and viewers will identify with, the indigos and the rainbows. We use these kind of words because we're talking to our tribe, we're talking to our collective on this. I wonder that as the beings arrive, the souls who are coming now, if they're not always going to have to come through trauma for their triggered timed awakenings and their blueprint matrix kind of viewpoint. I don't know. I throw that out there to you guys because we all nod our heads in recognition of one another, so we all know what it is to get here and to know what we know today and to hold consciously what we hold. I'm hopeful that that's not, as this planet transfigures the third to the fifth transfiguration anyway, that will not have to be the motif. I don't know. What do you think?
I've noticed that it seems a lot softer for people. We haven't had to push it to the absolute limits of spending the night in jail, shall we say, to be able to wake up. But you notice, like the younger generations, people that are like in their 20s, 30s, even kind of early 40s, not quite had to push it that far. So whether or not it's just been the fact that we've had to push it to its limits because we have to understand the limits, be a part of it. Because I know if I go into something, I have to dissect and I have to know it all. Some that are coming in have already got a good experience in some of those fields. They're only topping up some of the boundaries that they have or non-boundaries that they have, rather than perhaps have to be completely and utterly diluted in it to be able to go, oh, I know what that is now. Because the whole human expression is tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky, and I think that I think I like identifying myself. I think it helps soothe my soul to identify, and especially when I was since the 2012 and then 2014, 16 cosmic triggers. It soothes me to see myself as an early bringer of the new dawn. I find it really comforting to identify, because the pain is real, people, and the pain was great, and it took a lot of our brothers and sisters off this planet. It's been so toxic.
Yeah.
And here's Lisa talking about your experiences, Lisa, in your own toxicity, and having to find, it's like threading the eye of the needle that we talk about. It's like figuring out, Magenta Pixie talks about it as flattening the wave. If we do it from a spirit science viewpoint, she talks about being able to come into realizing that you're a creator, that you the ability to come into who you are and realize who you are. There's an alchemy involved, and Lisa sort of described that alchemy. When it took going out of jail, it took having the legal system kind of clunker over the head. But so I don't know. I'm just aware. I just wanted to mention sort of this path and process and point out maybe a bit of the softness. I think that there are also technicians that come in at different points on the timeline, Satara. I think we were all three of us, highly technically capable for the blueprint job that we agreed to.
Very much so. Yeah.
And we're not needed in the same way. And in the same way that those, let's talk about as millennials. Let's talk about them as Generation Z. Their jobs are distinctly different. They're not to come in and spend a night of jail. They're not to come in fully awake and not forgetting and have to pretend that as you did, that you knew what you knew.
Trying to pretend I don't know anything ever. Yeah.
Right. And trying to act like. But what we were doing, because what I see somebody like you doing, Satara, is you came in with this incredibly awakened self who just didn't forget, especially the star family patterning and stories. And you saw in Matrix, you had to learn to see human, if I got you right.
Yeah, totally.
And you are here to hold that truth that you couldn't speak to as a child.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I know what those things are like. I used to stand on a well top on the farm out in front of my parents' house, and I would speak to the masses, which was the Milo fields, the pine trees, the watermelons over to the right. I mean, this is my grandfather's farm, and I was talking about how well humans can be. I'm 7 years old. I'm 9 years old. We're emanators. There's a part of our blueprint, and this is you too, Lisa. And it's also interesting that we each then had to drive our skill sets into tools. Like you drove into Reiki and a million other things, Satara. Yeah, little certificates, and we had to find places where we could outwardly serve and use our language. I became a psychotherapist, a clinician in the mental health field, so I could kind of drive it secretly, quietly, the magic, the alchemy into a field. And then what I see with you, Lisa, because you went on to, so what kinds of services did you go on to as you began to come out? So take us on that next walk of your path.
Okay. Well, I mean, so when I was a kid, and when I got to be like a teenager, I was certainly just modeling the behaviors and the things that I was brought up in, right? And I didn't know that there was consciousness or that I had a choice, and that, I was in a matrix with my family. But when I realized that, and it was like, it was almost like the heavens opened up and somebody was like, you're here to help people. And I would journal about it and stuff. Then I started looking at, how do I do that? What's that look like? And I found that book, What Color is Your Parachute? And I filled out the parachute and found that healthcare. And so I was looking at that and I was like, what about nursing? And, well, And what about physical therapy? And that was an almost. But then I had a conversation with a stranger one day who said, have you ever considered massage therapy? And then that was another like light bulb moment, and the heavens opened up. And when I decided and realized that was the thing, it made sense too, because I would always rub my dad's back and his feet when he'd get home from work. He was a mechanic. And so he just would always, you know, would you rub my feet? Would you rub my back? And of course, Daddy. But then also everything started to line up for me, and the steps along my path were there. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to do too much planning. The things just started to show up once I made my decision. And so that's part of how I knew that that was definitely the way to go. Aside from that, I felt it in my, you know, in my body. I felt it in my heart. And then, you know, I did great. I was really dedicated to it. I worked hard. I paid my way. A friend of mine, she went to all of her, to a bunch of people in her community and her customers and stuff, and she raised money for my massage table, my first massage table. So just things happened, you know, and it all came together. And then immediately I went into Reiki and therapeutic touch, energy healing. Like that, it was instantaneous as I was studying massage. And then shortly after that, I went through an ordination, like a training and an ordination. And initially that was just supposed to be a ritualistic affirmation of my desire to help other people and my desire for my own healing. But little did I know at that time the ways in which that was serve me and carry me forward, you know, to where I am. It's like all these things happen, and you know, the more you have hindsight and look back and you're going, oh, okay, you know, I get why that happened. And the things that I sort of had this intuitive understanding around that were really important steps in my journey that have come to serve me in huge ways, you know, years and years, decades down the road.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Just the way that as soon as we actually commit and put our feet on that path, it turns into some sort of elevator with different floors coming at us at all different angles. Like, oh, we can have a go at that, and we'll do that next, and we just go boom, don't we? Yeah, very, very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like the fast finger button on evolution. Like, you know, that's the fast forward button. Somebody's pressing the fast forward button once, you know, once I got it, and once I was like, okay, then it was like, okay, well, here you go. And things sped up and just showed up, and bam, 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 bam. And I took all those opportunities and I went for it hardcore.
Yeah, that's really good. It just, yeah, it was just reminded me of how I started in a way. It took me a long time to get over myself and actually get back on the path, because I'd shut down for 10 years because I was trying to hide, I think is a good way of putting it, trying to run with the crowd rather than being the strange kid that was always on their own. Yeah, we've all been strange kids. I just find that really interesting. And I actually signed up to go to college, and I thought, right, I'm really, really interested in doing aromatherapy massage. But actually, I quite like the idea of reflexology as well, remembering reflexology back from ancient Egypt. So I signed up for both courses, and they mixed the paperwork up, and they put me doing a diploma in reflexology and a taster in aromatherapy. And at the time, I just think, you can't get anybody to do anything you want them to, can you? It's your first thought. You know, you just think, oh, right, you have to do lots of paperwork up. Somebody gets hold of them, completely messes it up. But I thought, no, okay, just step back, just go with it, see what happens. And I learned the other way. I thought, yeah, I know why I'm not going to do the diploma in massage now, because actually I don't want to be touching people that much. Feet and hands I'm good with. So I understood why it was messed around at that time, because I needed to get my confidence with working with another human, because my family is dysfunctional. For all intents and purposes, I'm an only child with very absent parents. So I kind of raised myself. So I'm not used to touching, or certainly at that point, I wasn't used to touching anybody. No one ever touched me. So therefore you never touched anybody. And you have this kind of thing. So for me, it was so uncomfortable, the thought of asking someone to like get half naked to massage them. At that point, I couldn't do it. And it's just the way it is, isn't it? I can now, I've got no problem now. It's like, yeah, get your kit off, it's great. No problem. But, you know, we'll roll back to when I was like 27, and it was just like, oh, yeah, I've got to touch them. Okay, how's this going to work? Yeah, so I can get how that, you know, and it comes in the way that we need it to come into, so that, you know, our light teams that work around us, our guides and helpers, know us deeper than we know ourselves. So I can understand why they mess paperwork up, they put us on the wrong train, they do all sorts of things, don't they? Because they know that we're going to be better over here than where we thought to be.
I call that a course correction. Those happen a lot. I'm like, oh no, if something doesn't work out or it's falling apart, like that's probably a course correction.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely, totally. So that just made me smile then. I was like, yeah, I know how that works.
So the lesson is about trust, about implicit trust. And I do think that it's like once you begin to trust, you see what comes your way, and then you trust that, and then more things come. Because Lisa said something really important there too, that, you know, things start to come quicker, faster. Yeah. And I think that, okay, so this is a good time to talk about the planetary energetics, and that we know that there is an acceleration on our planet. And I'm wondering, and when I say acceleration, I mean, I'm going to be able to, I say it from the perspective of what's coming in from solar energy, solar plasma energy, solar winds. I'm, you know, my perception of what's going on from just the time and where we are in our planetary cycle and our solar system. I'm wondering, Satara, if you can speak to some of that. Lisa, how your and axial, because and our listeners and viewers really understand these things, that the shift of the axis of our planet post the fall of Atlantis. And I'm looking at 2 Atlantean sisters right now. So for you all watching and listening, there's an identification that all 3 of us are Atlantean Priestess experience and motifs that we bring forward into the present. So anybody want to talk about what's happening on the planet within your work, how you talk about it, how you position it with when it comes up, or what would you like our listeners and viewers to understand about why we unfolded the way we did and why things are going so quickly for all of us? You know, the downloads, the information, you know, any perspective on that. Maybe I can start with you, Lisa, and then Satara, if you'll kind of put a big frame around it. Mm-hmm. What would you want us to, how do you talk about it, or how do you position that?
Well, my understanding is that our souls come in to do specific work and learn specific lessons. And so, of course, you know, I chose to be in my family for a number of reasons, and some of which I'm still, you know, unfurling and understanding in this day and age, you know, while I'm about to turn 50, and I'm like, oh, that's part of why this happened the way it does, and unfolded in what I thought was painful, but it's no longer painful for me kind of way. So we're all here to go on this life journey, and we choose certain people and certain incidents and circumstances and situations to help us along the way. And, you know, I look at natal charts and astrology, so I see how that shows up in a natal chart with planetary position and that sort of thing too. And it speaks to certain challenges and gifts and certain drives that you know are just the way that we're made up. And so it's like if we could come in at the perfect time with a certain set of circumstances and family and people in order that we can go through certain things and learn certain lessons. And I know that so much of it right now, why we've all chosen to be here is because the planet is in need of our help and our healing. And that those of us who are doing the capital W work, that have done a lot of work on ourselves, we are holding and raising the vibrations so that even just being in a room with somebody like me or either of you is a catalyst to people. Their frequencies change, and they might even not like us because they're feeling triggered and they don't understand why. But we catalyze people just by being who we are and holding a vibration. And so those people, if they're not already kind of out in the world getting pinged that way, they're going to come into contact with somebody like us. Even just walking down the street and smiling at somebody, I know I had an effect. And with what's and with what's going on right now, especially with the South Node of Fate and Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn right now. The last time Saturn and Pluto were in Capricorn and conjuncting was in 1776. And so we know here in the United States how huge that time frame was in the evolution of our society. And it's interesting to me because I think we're trying to evolve more, and instead we've kind of screwed it up. It's not sustainable anymore. So we're having to let go of old systems and structures. We have to do that in order that we can sort of reimagine our society and that's the macrocosm and the microcosm of our own lives. The structures, the systems, the beliefs, that whatever, we've got to let go of so much and re-envision what that means going forward in ways that help us to evolve the way that we want to, that help us to grow and to bring vitality not just into our lives but to the earth at the same time.
Yeah, beautifully said, Lisa. I agree. We are emanators by design. We came, any human living today is a miraculous emanator. It's just how much have they cleared of the old programming that's on the planet and what I would call false matrix, lower vibratory explorations, etc., in order for their light to literally shine in the way that they quite naturally could. So that's sort of the name of the game, isn't it? So Tara, how would you frame up this time period on the planet as in the ways that we're talking about it at the moment?
Yeah, well, me being typically me, I kind of see things a bit differently at the moment with how it's kind of working in my little bubble here. I'm very aware that there's time slips going on. And I've been paying attention to these time slips since the 1997 convergence, particularly. I did start to notice them in 85. But I was still too busy partying in 85 to really pay that much attention to them. Like Lisa, I've gone 50 last month in March. So very similar sort of age and whatever. So 85, I was just finishing high school. I was just on the cusp of college. And I was out 7 nights a week. That's how it worked. So yeah, very much so a totally different time. So yeah, so I kind of noticed the time slips more than anything. I'm very aware that some days are an awful lot longer than 24 hours. And then every so often there's one that compensates for it. And I think it feels like 7 hours for the whole day. And you just think, how did that possibly happen? How did that, go to that extreme? So I'm noticing this sort of the way that the time is slipping, see how that is starting to affect some of the matrix here and how some of the programming of need those sort of extended times or decreased times, depending on what's being taken away from the matrix here. Because I'm aware that there are a lot of programs being removed to make room for the new programs coming in, which take up more of, shall we say, the hard drive. So therefore, we've had to get rid of the, deleted stuff. Let's get the cache emptied and let's just get some more in. And this is why we can feel these sort of time slips occasionally. very much aware of the polar shift. I'm watching with interest because I was surprised when I came back in as a human to look to the heavens and it was a different pole star to what I remembered. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it'll be interesting because it's going back to the one I know. I'm like, oh, good. It'll all be back to normal. You know, like
on the time. Oh God, right? Looking up.
Yeah, totally.
So on the time slip component, and I'm aware because I will have moments that I can go back to say the early, say like 97, 98, 99, and I can remember like stopping my vehicle, about the sensation that things are still moving. In other words, there were a lot of little clues that there were that stuff was not as it seemed.
Yeah.
And then as recent as this past summer and fall, I literally was noticing the reality, this dimension wavering. There are days when you can look outside, just sort of softly look out, and the literal matrix, the environment is literally wobbling, wavering.
Totally.
You notice that, Lisa?
I've noticed that for decades and decades and decades, and I because I never thought of myself as very clairvoyant, but I could see energy often, especially around like the trees and stuff, and I could always see that energy, and I was like, is this just because I've partied too hard, or am I really seeing something? And I came to realize I really was seeing something.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I refer to it as glitches in the matrix because I just think that just explains it, doesn't it? The fantastic scene in I think it's the first Matrix film when they're going up a set of stairs and they see a black cat, and then they see the same black cat do the same thing again. It's like, oh, it's glitched the matrix. And I just roared at that. I thought I was going to be kicked out of the cinema, actually. I was in bits. I just absolutely lost it at that point because I just thought that was so hilarious because I was seeing it from the point of view of an awakened state, whereas most other people in the cinema were like, what's this film about? Yeah. I just thought that was hilarious. But you see it. You watch it happen.
That's been a huge awakening. And I'm wondering about that for you, Lisa, in your client work with the kind of folks that are coming forward, because one of the things that I know has to occur is us provider types by history, because I've been a decades-long behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse clinician. You guys have been Reiki providers, massage providers, Satara counseling, all this background that we have. What I'm aware of is us health providers and teachers, we're all having a comeuppance. It's asking us to raise our skill set and our platform to meet the fifth dimensional, that transfigurative time. I'm wondering how many health professionals like ourselves and well-being professionals like ourselves, allied health professionals is what it's called here in the U.S., when you're not, say, a doctor, not like a medical doctor. I'm wondering what the hell is happening to those people. They must be. I've always thought that I ought to be here with a catcher's mitt, make myself available to them to say, I know what's happening.
Yeah.
I can mirror it back to you so that you can be guaranteed of your sanity.
Mm-hmm.
And that you have, I've always felt that I was a teacher's teacher, for that perspective, for that a New Earth teacher, helping the teachers, the service to other souls who've made a career and a lifetime of service to know what the hell is happening.
So,
I don't know,
well, one of the things that I've been, I guess, like starting off some of the courses and workshops I teach with is this. I make a statement: society is not set up to help us thrive. And that's part of why all the ancient esoteric wisdom teachings are surfacing now, and why we have access to them, because society really is the matrix. I'm such a conspiracy theorist because I'm like, it's all trying to keep us inside this little box, and we're supposed to you know, be dedicated to our families as we grow up, and no matter how dysfunctional or messed up they are. We're supposed to, you know, like get an education and get a job and get married and buy a house and a car and have kids, so that we continue to spend all this money and have all the things we're supposed to have. And they sell us love and romance and marriage like it's the be all end all. And then we get there and we're like, this is it? Like, wait a minute, you know, because we're trying to fit inside the society's boxes and the norms and so I'm like, you know, you don't have to buy into that stuff. Do you realize that if we keep doing this, we've got the blinders on, we're putting ourselves in these uncomfortable little boxes that I never did well in. I didn't start to thrive until I shed all of that stuff and realized that when you do that, there's this infinite amount of possibility that's open and available to us. So I try to get people to understand, like, you know, why are you really making those choices? Why do you think you have to buy a house? What do you really want children, or do you just think you want children? Like, we've been programmed and indoctrinated from the word go. From the moment we, you know, got shot out the uterus, we've been indoctrinated and programmed to want certain things and to do certain things. And we think we want them because society tells us to want them.
Yeah,
but I'm like,
thinks is successful.
Yes, but
I'm like you. I see a box and I pour petrol on it and I light it and go, what box? Don't do boxing. So yeah, that is so true. And I think, you know, so many people have started to realize that they can start to listen to their own heart and start to work out what they want to do. Not what they're told to do, not what school conditions you. This is your route. This is how life will take it. This is exactly what you do. Then you die. Then you get reborn and you do it all again. That isn't how it works, is it?
Yeah, talk about samsara.
Yeah, I'm just like, no, shoot me now if that's how it's going to work.
But that is, I think, and for people who listen and watch this conversation, they know that is how it has worked for eons here on the planet. Yeah. But it was not when this planet was, when it was the time of Atlantis, let's say, it was not that kind of planetary experience at all.
At all. No, not at all.
And
I do wonder if that is part of this pole shift again, because at the time of Atlantis, when all three of us were part of the Atla Ra, we had a totally different pole star. Everything pointed to totally different systems. Nothing is anything like it is now, which is why I struggle a little bit now, because I just look up and just think, oh yeah, it doesn't look like that. And just go off on a different tangent. And I'm sure that this is why this reset that seems to be happening is just putting us back to where it was when everybody understood free will. They understood love and compassion for everybody else and just basically got on with it. They did what made their hearts sing. Not, oh, I've got to go to work because I've got to get X, Y, Z, A, B, C to pay for this, but I hate my job, which is what is going on with 90% of the population in work. They're doing the daily grind, not, you know, what they want to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it evidences itself in the conventional world. They've awoken to this because I teach sometimes from an HR perspective in organizations that 75 up to 75% of humans in industrialized nations, of workers, are disengaged from their work. What disengaged means is they are like robots. Listen to my language. They are like robots showing up to the work format where their life force is literally draining away from them because they are just sitting in la land in their minds. They're not having rich inner lives like I was when I was doing that. When I was doing that, I was engaged in the material, and then when I got that done, I was up in the rich inner life zone, enjoying myself wherever I am. We're talking about a devoid, incredibly powerful, beautiful soul, 75%. Sitting there and just, you know, trying to entertain themselves on Candy Crush, drained away. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of some of our listeners and viewers are familiar with Barbara Marciniak and her work of Bring Us the New Dawn, that whole series of Pleiadian channeling that she did forever. And she talks about have the programming that says, let's get in the games, let's just fritter away, let's go to our coffee houses, let's have our little meal, let's have this whole life so that our energy can just be drained from us. That's all that's about, and that's what we're talking about here, the awakening that's happening. We can frame it with an Atlantean or a Lemurian or a number of other times and places, for lack of a better way of describing. It's changing. As a matter of fact, the other person that comes to mind is Ken Wilber. Are either of you familiar with Ken Wilber's work? Yeah. Did you ever read Grace and Grit about his wife? You know, you weren't Sator, but you are Lisa. So he was one of the very first beings, and I see him he seems quite like from another world. I remember reading him and then meeting him and thinking, just all by you talk about happenstance. I found myself at a house party where I'm, eating out of the dip tray with him. I'm munching carrots and I look up and oh my God, I'm at his house. I'm not even, it's just a lot of things going on. But my point is, he was the first person to introduce spiral dynamics to me. Just to fall into spiral dynamics. I'm a creative. What do I know about that? But my point is, it just came a time on our planet for this to occur. In other words, there's a timed aspect to this that we're all taking part in that I think bears mentioning. So, Tara, when I say that, like time trigger, time release, time, and what maybe the Ayurvedic or the Indian viewpoint of the Yuga, and Lisa, when you hear me say that, what comes to mind? I think I want to start with Satara on that. Like the precession of the equinoxes, precession of the eclipses. Let's move to that for a minute. Is that like a 25? Let's talk about the photon belt. The 25,000 year progression. What comes up for both of you when you hear me talk like that? Satara, what happens to you? Where do you go?
To me, that's just the natural progression of how it's always been on several different realities, not least this solar system. The same happens, exactly the same in part of the Andromeda section, exactly that same progression to be able to follow cycles, if you will, by just following the sun and the moons that are around. Although duplicate moons, as opposed to, I don't know if you two remember, but we used to have 2 moons for this planet in the times of Atlantis. It's only in latter years that we've gone to 1. I don't think I've ever brought that up before, but there you go. There's the randomness.
I've seen it in pictures, but because people know it, but I don't know it for myself, but that makes complete sense. Actually, I've seen it in astral travel. I've seen it in astral experience, but I've never. Right.
Yeah, one looks a bit blue tinged and the other one's quite bright white. So they are different surfaces and slightly different energetics coming from them, but they used to literally like dance around. The moons would mirror each other. Referred to as twin moons rather than anything else, because we're pretty much identical size in look from this planet, although they were identical because it was the path that they were taking. One was considerably larger but further away, but of course it would look identical. So of course that kind of hooks. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, sorry, because before I forget it, and I want to hear kind of Lisa's perspective of that cyclical story too. So Tara, if that's the case, that it's a cyclical, because we're of course putting this in human language, it's very limited terms. And by the way, all language is light language. I just was prompted to say that. My guides like me to point that out. So in this way of talking about it, when we had what occurred for Atlantis, let's say, because people are really on this kind of environment in our show will understand that about the fall is due to the patriarchal, the big explosion business and the axial change. My understanding at a spirit science molecular standpoint is there's always descension, which is really involution, and there's evolution in all systems, right?
Yeah.
Are there events like in Andromeda? Let's talk about that, their own experiences with that. So did they too go through their own sort of cyclical
Yeah.
or involution, and
Very much so. The surface of one particular planet was completely and utterly annihilated, pretty much like we were when we think of the floods here that came after with the tsunamis and everything that went on. That was similar that went on there. However, because they were more spiritually evolved even than we were in Atlantis, actually built an underground catacomb system, so complete underground everything. They'd already started to remove soil samples, seeds and everything that would be needed to sustain life, but also to replant the planet after the events, which is just huge. Whereas here, we had to go, can you ship some in, please? We need some stuff.
And that Lemuria and Lemurians have really done a lot of that opportunity for us here.
Yes.
Actually, in their time and in their cycle.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to introduce that layering into this conversation for those of you who listen and watch, that we are aware of it from that viewpoint too. Lisa, when you hear, so it's good to know we're not, and that's what our star families really like to tell us. It's like, people, we've all done this. This is what you're doing on your planet. Please, no. Our Pleiadian friends, our Syrian friends, our Andromeda friends, they will all advise us the same. That we've done this. We are still doing this. This is the actual way. This is how it is for all existence, for all that is the movement. But Lisa, what comes up for you when you hear all of the angles just come into?
But so it's funny because I was actually thinking about this earlier before we got on the call, how the cycles of the sun and the moon and the earth are like spirals, and I think they push us along our evolution. I think that's one function. Another function that I've observed, because I do follow those things and track them very closely. And, in paganism and witchcraft, you have the wheel of the year. So it's a system by which we can be really in touch with the cycles and the seasons, and how, spring lends itself to initiatory energy and beginnings and starting things. And it's when we're starting to kind of metaphorically plant seeds, not just putting seeds in the actual earth to take root and grow. And then, winter time is the time to go within and the time to rest. And each of these points along the calendar or the wheel of the year correspond to different elements, different cardinal directions. But the more I've observed this, and I've been really actively observing now for 21 years, really actively observing that, I feel that I embody it. So I'm much more connected to nature and the earth and the sun and the moon, because I could feel it within me. And it makes it easier for me to understand, what's happening energetically, because I can just kind of tune in. Oh, okay. So, the moon's waxing right now. Right. And, and I think the moon is just gone into Gemini, so it's a great time for us to be having these kinds of conversations. So I know that I can do some planning around it. I can know that depending what the energy is, time of year, where the sun is, what the moon's doing, where the moon is, that it's going to lend itself to different activities. And those, it's a great way to capitalize on the energy. So I can do certain activities during those times when it's like a peak time to be doing the activities. It helps me to really be much more in tune with what's happening out here, outside. I took a walk this morning, and just feeling the earth and listening to the birds and feeling the energy from everything starting to come alive, and it's the little shoots and the buds and everything. but then we have those same cycles in our own lives. So, you know, I know too that when we get to autumn, we're going to be looking at the kinds of things that we're harvesting from, you know, what we've been doing at this time of year. And we're going to start harvesting and reaping that and sort of putting some of that to rest so that we can go inward for winter time and get ready for that cycle. But then we also, you know, we have the winter of our lifetime as we get to be, you know, much older people and our activities change, or versus, you know, the summer of our lifetime when we're young and we're running around, we've got a lot of activity, maybe we were partying, you know. So I just, I see that. And then as an astrologer, I also know that these cyclical events do push us in along in our evolution, and especially when we have things like solstices, equinoxes, full and new moons, and especially eclipses. They are real points of power and connection, and you know, things, fated events, things happen at those times, and it's to push us along and help us to learn and grow and move forward, so we don't get stuck in, you know, in those ruts that are easy to get stuck in.
Well, that's a very practical application, and I think that's something that Satara and I talk about on the show a lot. Is like I really do think we introduce a lot of triggered conceptualizations. I mean, here we were talking about Andromeda and their cycles. Here I'm talking about the photon belt and the planetary cycle. We introduce a lot of triggering conceptualizations that people, I know, will either resonate with or go away with and start to investigate. Because they will, the more you do that, the faster it unfolds. There's a commercial on Gaia TV. I don't know, I see it on my Instagram right now. That'll pop up. That'll say, the woman says, "Listen, the more you're willing to play with the universe is more than willing to play with you." I mean, it's this kind of thing. It goes really, the alchemy starts unpacking really, really in a quantum level, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're also doing on this show is talking about, we have 3D transfiguring to the fifth lives in this lifetime. I'm looking in your house in your little drapes, and I can see Satara's, you know, faux Tiffany lamp behind her head, and I'm obviously in my subterranean office in a townhome community. We're having 3D transfiguring to the fifth lives. Helping people figure out tools that they can use on an everyday basis that are not so complex and so not attainable, not reachable. You know, Satara, before you got to the show, you went and had a good workout.
I did indeed. I was in the gym earlier, and I've got a fantastic. Yeah, I know. But I love my gym, because when I'm on things like the treadmill and like the different cycles and whatever there's a huge window in front of us. Oh, and yeah. I was watching some birds nesting while I was working out. And I was probably the only person in that gym that noticed those birds, should we say. Everybody else is watching the screens, they're watching TV, they've got headphones in, they're doing whatever they're doing. But I actually thoroughly enjoyed myself just minding my own business and watching the birds nest. Because it's so high up, I was looking down on the nests. How did you do that? And that to me was just beautiful, because it's just a good reminder that really some of the best medicine we have on this planet is free.
Free energy.
It's just simply watching nature. It's simply going for a walk in nature. Or it's like me, who's a good one for lying on her back watching the stars. That's one of my things. I'm like, oh, yeah, and I'll just sit there and mind my own business, and then I'll go, oh, that's a star. Yeah.
When I think about what is real and what is true, and I'm talking about outside the matrix, I'm always blown away, because I've had TV for 15, 16 years, and I don't live in a suburban or urban area, but I go to one quite a bit, and so I see people like their activities to go out and shop, or their activities to watch TV, but those things to me, those aren't real. And so nature is one thing that no matter what, you can count on nature. It's real, it's true, capital T true. It's a real actual thing, and you can't dismiss it. It's objective, it's real, it's there, and there's so much knowledge and wisdom and understanding just in nature that if we just tune into that, because we are it is us, nature is where it's at.
Yeah, totally.
And yet people aren't noticing the birds.
They just don't see it. I live in a little village, so I'm the same. Amber was brought up on the farm, the same as I was brought up on a farm as well. And I'm sure that was part of our grand scheme, to be able to realise how important watching the grass grow is. Yeah? As opposed to, as you say, you've got this, I have a TV, but only because I'm a DVD watcher. I like to, if I need to just unwind, I put a film on and that's it. Actual TV, I don't watch. I don't go near it. I'm like, I can't handle that. But yeah. I don't need this crap in my life. So consequently, it has to be I'm this. I can deal with what what it said. Someone who watched Aquaman last night. So yeah, that was nice eye candy, and part of
Sometimes
different look of Atlantis.
Sometimes I tell myself with television, with media and so forth, and I'm aware that of our time frame, and we'll wrap up here shortly, giving, I think, Lisa the last words here from our conversation. But sometimes when with the media stuff, I like to, I'll say this to people sometimes, and certainly to myself, I have found third dimensional life terrifying. I find a lot, I did as a child, I found a lot of terror in life and in what was going on here, not the least of which in my own family. I found things terrifying. And so why do I need to dose myself with continued terror on the media, on the television programs, the really frightening stuff that we have happening, even in cartoons, there's so much fear evoking. And I think that that's about draining life force as well, so forth and so on. We could have a whole conversation on that. But Satara, anything else you'd like to say before we turn it to Lisa and thank her for today and give her some last words with us?
Mm-hmm. I'd just like to say I've really enjoyed today. It's been very nice to have another one of our kind on. I think that's the best way of putting it. Another part of the soul family steps forward. And I think that that's what it's all about. We're here to make connections with each other, but I'm being reminded and poked to say reconnections with each other, because of course we've walked paths in more places than we are in now, which is just beautiful really, when we can just recognize each other from across the ether on the planet and quietly join some dots back up between ourselves that we'd forgotten existed. Mm-hmm. That's just been really lovely. So I'm just going to hand over to Lisa to just wrap up.
Thank you. I'm going to echo your gratitude and the joy inherent in these kinds of conversations. This is the stuff I thrive off of and live for, because not everybody is plugged in the same ways or has the same understandings or knowledge. And it's it's an honor, and it's incredibly humbling to be able to serve humanity in a way where, even if it's just a small community or handful of people, to be able to help them get outside the matrix thinking and to be able to make different sense of what's happening in their lives and why it doesn't necessarily have to be bad or painful, or where pain can even be the holding on to the matrix and the made up stuff that we've been, sold and we bought into. That people can choose to listen to their hearts and to connect to nature, to have a much bigger, more varied, more fulfilling and enriched experience of life on this earth, because that's part of what's inherent in being embodied in this earth right now, is that we can enjoy and we can explore possibility and opportunity, and to not, cut the head off from the body and be all up here. I mean, I know for a long time I was up here, I wasn't here. I wanted to go back home to Arcturus. And I was like, when are you going to come into, I know the starship's following me around. I want to go back there. That's so much better and easier. If we can enjoy this existence and realize that we don't have to get wrapped up in all the societal stuff and the norms and even the things that our families try to impose upon us. We don't have to make that, our lives, we get to make that choice, and we get to make it in every single moment. We get to choose what we're calling in, and we get to choose what we're letting go of. And that's just a constant cycle. And that's part of the cycle too, the sun, moon, and earth, and the seasons. And so it's all together. And we just observe it and feel it in our bodies, and then we start to understand.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, it's been our pleasure. We've had another beautiful guest discussion here with Priestess Lisa Adams, and of course our divine Sitar Jules Lightbringer. I am again Amber Chamberlain, the Suburban Lightworker. This has been a beautiful time with everybody. Please share us with your friends and loved ones. We're a small collective, but a mighty collective, and always growing. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again here, and we look forward to doing this again.
Thank you.
Much love, everybody.
Yay.
All right, we did it.